Welcome, everyone. This is once again your host, Shailesh, bringing you live. This is Emotional Wellbeing Series. We are one, and this is a podcast that we have created a few months ago, and we have been bringing lots of topics around this emotional well-being, which is the need of the hour, but it is always the need of a human journey. Today, I have the pleasure to invite an esteemed guest speaker from Australia, Kelli Hurley, who is not just a transformational coach, but she's a healer. And what more than we can expect in a relationship? We need healing constantly, every single moment. And to heal that today, we have the pleasure today to invite our esteemed guest from Australia, who is going to talk to us, take us through this journey of relationships. But today, relationships, we talk, but what is relationships? And what is anxiety in relationships? Because we are anxious. We are anxious from every single moment we are born. We want to do this, we want to do that, we want to move, we want to, touch, we want to feel. All these things are the ingredient part and parcel of a human journey as a child, as a grown up, as until we disappear as a human. Humans are born for that. So humans create relationships. Humans also generate relationships. And so let's dwell into this rather than me talking. I want to do the talking by our guest speaker, and let's hear from her. But welcome, Kelli, for this beautiful topic that we have chosen, and that you are one of those transformational coaches for people to heal. And you are just not just healer, you have got abundance of energy. So I'm going to bring this energy today live for the people to hear from you and listen to your beautiful thoughts that can really make an impact or make a difference to their simple living of creating relationships. So let's introduce yourself and tell us something a little bit about you, and then we'll dwell back into the topic.
Well, as Shailesh has said, I'm Kelli Hurley, and I am the founder of Energetically Inspired. For me, the foundations of life is energy, right? And it's the vibration of what we bring to the world. And when we come more into our true self and start to work with our healing itself, we actually shift our vibration into much better spaces. Or we start to actually understand and accept pieces of ourselves that society doesn't deem as ideal, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And we all have shadow aspects. We all have things that maybe ourselves or other people don't like or have judgments around, yet it's natural for us to all have these aspects. Judgment is actually a very natural thing to our society, and has lived in generations of things, even from the original sort of religions used to speak a lot into that, but that's a whole nother subject. For me, I help people transform, and I look at the energetics, because if we shift the energy, we shift the physical world. If we shift what's within us, we change the outer world. It's always a mirror. So a lot of the time too, people sort of see triggers and things, and they look at it externally and blame and project externally. Whereas when we start to turn these things internally, we actually start to understand ourselves and actually can start to shift our perceptions, but also the energetics around us. And we see things with a different, more awakened or awareness. So yeah, I kind of work on lots of different topics. And today, we've chosen anxiety in relationships, because it is something that so many of us are consumed by. And I know I've been in relationships where I've been actually completely consumed by it myself. And it was part of my healing journey. When we look at anxiety, anxiety is actually very natural to the nervous system, to the sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is all about survival. It's all about keeping you safe, right? So everybody's going to experience anxiety. It's just the degree of the anxiety and whether it becomes a patterned response in our everyday life. The anxiety in relationships is quite an interesting topic, because usually it's seeking safety within that relationship. It's seeking security. And we get triggered by old patterns, old wounds, just not feeling safe, looking for a predictable future, trying to control something. And the only thing that we can actually is predictable in life is that everything is ever changing. Energy is always changing. It's always seeking balance. It's always moving, right? So when we try to control things, we are actually creating more resistance in our energetic field, which is actually quite harmful to us being able to create the life that we want. If we're more resistant and create more boundaries and more walls, we are trying to force the universe to play down a path. And so often it will keep diverting you. And those diversions are where we start to get anxious because our nervous system doesn't know how to look outside of those walls, outside of those boundaries and those things that we expect something to be a certain way. So
Yeah. So
learning to manage this is really, really powerful.
mm, yeah, we'll come to that. What you are saying is very much impactful in terms of anxieties. But let's go back to the basics first, that why this anxiety is created. But first and foremost is, what is relationship according to you? And how does it play an important role? And with the relation territory, this anxiety comes and other things also come. But relationship, what is relationship? Tell us your experience, in your way. How does people like to know about the relationships that they create? Relations can be with material relationships, can be with human relationships, can be with nature, can be with something that they are only aware of it and nobody knows what they have created. Within yourself as well, there is a relationship. So what is relationship really is as a human journey?
Well, relationship really is our connection to anything. As you said, a relationship, we so often see relationships as only being with somebody or with a person, but
Yeah.
we have relationships. We relate to them in some way. And that's the beginning of the word of relationships. Relationships is relating to something, another ship or another vessel or another thing, right? And,
Yeah.
for me, I mean, I used to always look at, looking for the ideal relationship. And that really came back into finding me and having the ideal relationship with myself. How did I, have that relationship with my values or the things I desired, the universe? There's so many things that we create relationships with. And it's really understanding what are our desires, our needs, how do we become consistent or interact? What are our thoughts and beliefs? How do we interact with that thing? And that's really, really powerful. I mean, even people look at money and it's like we have a relationship with that money, that
Mhm.
frequency. It's all about a frequency and how we interact with that frequency. Most people, I guess, like I said, when we're going into anxiety in relationships, most people's relationship comes with that another person, which is actually because we are designed to be interactive with others. We are not supposed to be solo. So the anxiety in that space kind of comes from fear of loneliness, fear of not being accepted, a fear of abandonment, all those internal programming to actually make us more tribal, to make us more connected to other things, right? And really that's what we do. We create fears around all kinds of things, whether it's fear of not having enough money or and that we're not going to be able to survive, because anxiety is a survival mechanism within the human structure and the nervous system. So I think I kind of covered most of what you were
Yeah,
asking
you
there.
covered a lot, but I think I still want to check on the, you said very good point you raised that about the relationships is like, how you connect and how you reconnect. But what is the relation? Like relate, the word itself relate. How do you relate to every
Mhm.
single thing around you? And how
Well,
is that necessary? Is that the natural, as you said rightly, it is the natural instinct of survival that we
mhm,
relate. We
mhm,
automatically relate to something because we are born, so we relate to your mother, or you relate to your
mhm.
surroundings, or you relate to everything around you. In your world, and that is that the way this relationship then is created, but also then the anxiety part of it, which is actually a natural ingredient, as you said, kept saying about the survival mode, that we want to survive. And this anxiety is nothing but confirming your survival basically every single moment. Is that what
Mhm.
it is?
Well,
Something.
relating is, how do we relate? So, well, that is our beliefs, our thoughts, our all those energetic things that we have programmed ourselves to have a certain belief around that. And that is how we're going to relate to anything. So
Mm,
if we feel, that there is lack of, or that we're unsafe, we are going to relate to it from that space. These things, when we start to think of our thoughts and our beliefs, are very much attached to the mind's aspect, right? Which is
mm,
very much governed around the nervous system. It's around survival. So
mm,
these are the programs that the mind creates. Now, if we were starting to relate more from our heart space, it's a whole different type of level of relating. There is much more, it's more of about of a feeling. And how do we feel in this moment? What is our, connection to them? Do they bring us joy and happiness? Or is it triggering something within us that
mm.
might be a shadow or emotional overwhelm? And then that's a piece for us to go internally investigate. Well, where are they coming from? Usually it's coming from, again, the mind has created a story or a wound or a trigger from a previous experience. So this is where the relating comes on different levels, is whether we're relating from our mind or are we relating from the heart. Are we
Mm.
relating from our spirit and soul, or are we relating from the programming of being human?
Yeah. So I want to ask you this question about when you talked about relationship, we create relationship, but then when you resonate with something or when you relate with something, but does that mean that our mind, our thoughts, as you said, keeps changing as we grow, as we want to create more and more relations and more relating things that are attached with us or within
Yep.
us?
Well, the mind can be ever changed as well. It's energetics,
Yeah.
right? And there's some programs
Definitely.
there that are part of our human blueprint. So we are born with certain aspects and DNA imprinting on us, but that doesn't mean it has to control us. This is where we start to become aware and reflective and witness. What are we thinking? How
Mm,
are we relating? What are those behaviors? And as we start to, I know when I work more from my mind, it is very different to, if I'm starting to drop into my heart space, the thoughts change vibrationally, that I can start to actually direct those thoughts and change the way I start to relate to things. If I continue to tell myself a story that, might be from wounding or attachment or something like that, that is not actually serving me, but keeping me stuck, it's keeping me in that pattern. So we're going to continue to have the same
sure.
stories and patterns over and over again. But we are supposed to ever change. We're supposed to grow. We're supposed to evolve. So it's starting to open our, mind's concepts to a higher understanding. What is that? How do we relate in that space from the heart? And being open to ever changing.
So you mean the anxiety or the anxiousness restricts us, stops us from evolving, from moving, or is it just getting us stuck somewhere? Or is it really triggering us to also say that, look, you are anxious at the moment, but let's move on from here? How do we make those transitions?
Well, that really comes down to self awareness and also being able to work with the anxiety and recognize that it's there. I know in my previous experience where I've been consumed with anxiety, say in a relationship with a person, that
Yeah.
was my body telling me that I'm feeling unsafe, that I'm not trusting and listening to something within me, that maybe I'm not speaking and, actually talking into something, or that person wasn't making my heart feel safe and wasn't in integrity. So there could be lots of things that are going on. So that
Mm,
anxiety can be actually a very big clue or a flag to actually being able to shift something in our environment. But
mm,
there is also that degree that it can be actually in control of you, and that people don't know how to actually investigate. How do we actually relate to our anxiety? Is our anxiety that feeling, oh gosh, now I'm, I need to hide away, I feel overwhelmed, and that can come down to our patterns around how do we heal and how do we witness. It also can be in relation to our fight and flight, which
mm,
for me, I become a little bit more of a fighter. So more so that I will confront those things, right? I will stand in that and actually investigate what is going on. But if someone had a fight and flight to freeze or to flight, they may not have that normal, stepping stone to move forward into that. They want to run away from the anxiety, but the anxiety just keeps following them, and it just keeps repeating and
Yeah.
over for them to move forward. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it really, it can be actually very consuming and controlling and have massive effects and limit you to not moving forward and not taking chances or opening doors if you let it. If you actually start to sit with it and become friends with that part of yourself and start to understand relating to yourself and unrelating, having a relationship with your anxiety, it is
Mm.
telling you something. It is trying to hold your hand and
Mm.
actually move you into growth.
Mm. Mm. So that's a very fine line, but it is, isn't it? As you said, self-awareness, and this is very much person to person, human to human, whether they recognize, whether they accept, whether they understand what is self-awareness is a big question, $1 million
Mhm.
question, because 99% what I see in today's world or the system that we live in is everybody is looking forward to others to say, this is what I want, or this is what you have achieved, so I would like to do that. So that's not a self-awareness. It's more like a you awareness from others. What are you learning from others? So in terms of this system that we are living in and the self-awareness, that not everybody's cup of tea kind of, but it should be kind of, what I understand from your conversation, that self-awareness is very key. But question is whether are everybody, does anyone know what is self-awareness? Starting from there, how do you draw a line of anxiety to this, when this anxiety is a positive thing, is a negative thing, or is something that you said that it will lead to growth, or when you understand that it will lead to growth rather than lead to stuck somewhere? How do you define that? How do you like make that transition of anxiety awareness for yourself?
Well, I guess that comes down to that again, that internal reflection of watching how I would respond. Is it keeping me trapped and am I being consumed by it? That it is actually governing my life every day inside out, and that I don't seem to be able to find a way out because it can actually be very much a blocker, right? Because it's really about fear-based thoughts. And so then we start to govern, are we actually starting to feel, are we, because those fear-based thoughts are thoughts. Yeah, we're back in that
Yeah,
head space.
absolutely. Their thoughts. Yeah.
And awareness comes back to how am I feeling, actually sort of getting curious, not judging it. Judgment is very much a right and a wrong. And
Mm.
so if we were going to sit here and we're judging anxiety, there can be right and wrong in this aspect, right? But really it's actually all one thing, right? It's just whether how much is it consuming you, where it becomes probably not ideal. It's not ideal if it's consuming you. And it
Mm.
does it. But for me, when I had those moments of really being deeply in my anxiety and sitting with it, I started to see what it actually was telling me. And it was all about that I was seeking safety, that I didn't feel safe. And those things can be around not being seen, being heard, that somebody isn't in integrity to their words or following actions from those words. There's certain things. Now, if we start to lean into that even more, are we safe?
Mm.
Do we feel safe within ourselves?
Yeah.
If a certain connection is continually making us feel unsafe, why
Yeah.
do we feel unsafe? Because it
Mm.
might not actually be them. Yes, it may be. Usually, I find if it becomes consuming, there is something I'm not sitting with, that I am actually not honoring. And that's why it's becoming more amplified in my body, because most people don't change something until it becomes overwhelming, that they have no choice. They cannot live with where they're at anymore. And that's when most people dive into their spirituality and their awakening phase, because life is consuming them. They cannot deal with this anymore. Yet we have a choice before that. And that's through learning to be with ourselves, to actually feel. And yet so many people are disconnected to feeling. If it doesn't feel good, what is it saying to us? Why are we not feeling good? What is it that we really need in that space? And it's really that interaction of actually being with ourselves and being curious, not judging, because that judgment is only going to condemn that part of ourselves, and it energetically pushes it back down into our psyche or into our subconscious. Then it
Mm.
appears its head up again in another way or in the same way as a pattern, and for us to actually be with it again. Or until we start to actually get with that part of ourselves, it just wants to be seen. It just wants to be acknowledged. And it is actually can be a very healthy part of living. We have anxiety pop up in our field. We know we're just nervous. We don't feel safe about something in our environment. And most of the time, anxiety stems from future. It is not usually like right now, we are thinking about a scenario or a situation or something like that. And it's leading us into how is this going to turn out? So there's that control aspect that we are trying to control. But it's very much more stems, most people that have anxiety issues is really because they're scared of the future, not about the present moment. The mind is bouncing between the past and the future. The heart is very much around present. What do I feel right now in this moment? And start to be curious with yourself. Start being open, honest, reflective. I journal a lot in that time because my head will have too much to say. And as I journal out, the pieces are there in front of me, and I go, that's the thing that I cannot hear through all the chaos in my head, right? It's just because my body's overwhelmed with wanting me to see something, but it's got all the stories, beliefs, thoughts with it as well.
So is it that situation, we can call it more like when you are anxiety or when you are anxious about future or past thinking and whether what you want to do and what your desires are, does it make you more vulnerable as a human in that spot? And that vulnerability, is it a good vulnerability or is it something, a vulnerability that we have to manage?
I
How do you
think
see?
vulnerability is actually a beautiful thing in all aspects. I mean, I sometimes can be very scared to show my vulnerability because it's actually speaking from my heart and being seen so authentically without wanting judgment, right? And so when we want to be vulnerable, it is really a beautiful thing because we are really starting to connect into how do we feel and opening ourselves to wanting to be safe to express. So
Yeah.
I really love vulnerability. And
Mm,
vulnerability is definitely one of the biggest gateways to finding really healthy connections with people. If we can be really honest and open
yeah.
and express from our
Yes.
truth in that moment without being judged, but just being able to have a gateway or a space to hold that's holding us for a moment to be heard and just
Yeah.
let that energy out. Sometimes it is one of the most healing things. It's like releasing a bag. It's like releasing all this stuff in our head, taking the weight off of ourselves. Most
Mm,
people are scared to be vulnerable
mm,
because people do judge. We don't
mm,
have connections or relationships with other people. But
mm.
usually, if we don't have those connections and relationships with others where we can be vulnerable, it's because we can't be vulnerable with ourselves.
So what part of energetic plays and what part of communication plays when it is anxiety in a relationship, particularly, if I have to ask you,
Sorry,
how
say that one again.
what sort of energetic role, or when you talk about energetics and when you are healer, and then I will also come to that last aspect. So one is energetics, then one is the, what we were discussing about was how communication also makes an important part in anxiety, because
Mhm,
anxiety is like whether you communicate with others or yourself, it is a communication. And what
mhm,
we are hearing from you, Kelly, today is like, how do you connect with ourselves and how do you make self-awareness? It's all about communicating, in other
mhm,
words, with
mhm.
yourself.
Yep.
So in your terms, how do you see that role of communication and energetics, when you bring your energetics role into this and your spirituality role into this? How do you make this anxiety, you know, make a wonderful feeling, or even though vulnerable, make this anxiety in relationships as the leading path towards growth rather than stuck there or
Mm,
having fear? Because if you're not communicating, if you don't have energy, if you don't have the spiritual way of thinking or thoughts, then you are always going to be in a mechanical form of journey. How do you see these three important roles that you are very much into mastering this coaching for people, when it comes to
mm,
energetics, when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to, communication with yourself or others?
mm,
And when we are talking today is anxiety, does anxiety has got a role, all these three has got a role to play when you are anxious, when you are anxiety, in that mode of anxiety? How
Mm.
do you how do you say this?
Well, anxiety is definitely a lower frequency vibration because it stems from the sympathetic nervous system, and it's only going to exist when we're in a beta frequency. Okay. And if we are actually in anxiety and in the sympathetic nervous system, we are actually going to be a lot more hindered or trapped by the
Mhm.
programming around our sympathetic nervous system. So for me, it's learning to actually step out of the anxiety. And to do that, it is really using tools, like the tools that I've learned over years that helped
Mhm.
me come back to this moment and raise my frequency. Because if we really want to know, find a door, we need to be open to that. But if we are in our sympathetic nervous system, we are not open to receiving new knowledge, to changing things. It is very,
Yeah.
very restrictive. And so to change the vibration, we just can flip ourselves into our heart and into gratitude and into appreciation. Some people will struggle with that, starting to think of things they love. They just keep flipping back to the negative things, right? For me as well, another tool that I would use then would be using my sensuality or senses. Sensuality is activation of our senses, right? And so at any time, if we were to stop and tickle our hand for a minute and just close our eyes and feel, right? And just give ourselves that little bit of self-love and connection. We're going to come out of our mind for a moment. We're dropping back into the body itself. And
Mm.
that can be really, really powerful. What can I hear right now? I can hear lots of birds around me because I live next to beautiful acreage. I can see lots of beautiful green trees, and there's some flowers, and there's other things that I can bring myself into the present moment. And then
Sure.
with that appreciation of those things and that connection, I'm raising my frequency, right?
Mm.
So I am therefore being able to move out of that into a place that I'm more receptive to
Mm.
learning something new, learning a new process, then being able to come into and start to witness, ask myself those questions in those moments, right? Because if you're in the anxiety and you're consumed by it, it's very hard to see what is what. And
Mm.
we're more in the head than in our feelings, definitely. So how do we connect back to the feeling aspect? By being present. And that for me is using simple tools. There's so many ones that, it's shutting down. We shared previously in stress energetics,
Yeah.
about the
Mm.
triple warmer, right? We can actually rebalance that. It's grounding our energy, even with a stainless steel spoon is one of the best ones. But there's things we need to do to our physical body to flip us back into the parasympathetic system and then shift our vibration into a more open, expansive, receptive place. And then
Mm.
all of a sudden, we can start to receive messages. If you really want a gateway out, the answers
Mhm.
will appear. You just have to be open to and wanting to receive them, because if you're in your sympathetic nervous system, it doesn't like anything new. That new opening or opportunity or solution, it's going to question it. It's going to
Mhm.
create anxiety. It's going to have red flags around it. So you're looping again. You're back in that scenario that you don't know if you're safe to do this. Is this even going to work? It's going to create stories around that that are not going to lead you into that pathway. And so
Absolutely.
that's where it's really important to actually to shut that system down for a moment.
Mm.
But a lot of people live in a hyperactive sympathetic nervous system. Their
Mm.
sympathetic nervous system is on all day long from stress or depression or being rushed. They're in their head, and therefore they're very limited in their capacity to actually go into that internal healing and witnessing and presence.
Mm. Okay. We are coming to the final point of that when it comes to anxiety in relationships, because the relationships can be, as we mentioned at the start, relations can be of all kinds, all types, all areas, all categories that we can categorize into. And we create these relationships ourselves. So we commit to these things.
Mhm,
As a human, we commit when we create relationships. And
mhm,
that commitment makes us more anxiety, gives us anxiety feeling. And
mhm,
when it comes to that, what is your message to all those people who are listening today about this anxiety? As you said rightly, anxiety or anxiousness comes from the future, that
mhm,
thinking about future, thinking about the past, but you forget the present moment. So,
Mhm.
to all these listeners who are listening about this beautiful topic, how do you say that they have created different relations in their own journey, but with that comes the commitment, with that commitment comes the anxiousness? And
Mm.
when it comes to that, how do you, what's your message to those people to deal with and manage with this anxiety of various kinds of anxiety?
Interesting though, like for me, I find that if I got more commitment in a relationship, because I choose those relationships
Mm-hmm.
carefully,
Right.
I actually have less anxiety because then I've created a space of safety, a space that I can be vulnerable and openly communicate, right? So if they're finding that they're getting anxious through commitment, they're choosing relationships that they're not or are not being able to express themselves openly and honestly. And, a lot of the time too, we might enter into relationships, and if we've got the underlining current of an anxious attachment, so
Mm.
we get anxiously attached. There's different attachment styles. There's
Yeah.
secure and there's avoidance. If
Mm.
we've got an anxious attachment style, we are more likely to be a people pleaser. And so
Mm.
that means we're never honoring ourselves, and we're
Mm.
never actually being able to, we're wanting to always satisfy somebody else, or we're always wanting somebody else's approval. We're always wanting them to guide us, and we're never trusting within ourselves. So
Mm.
somebody that has like that people pleasing aspect may definitely get more anxious in a committed relationship because their body's saying to you, you're not trusting me. I know something's not right here, but you're not even going to speak into this because your fear of abandonment or being judged is overriding you right now. And so it
Mm.
builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up. And so that's where we, and I used to, in only once that I've actually experienced it, I experienced the avoidant, in a relationship, an avoidant, and
Mm.
it triggered an anxious attachment. There's a polarity play out in the archetypes there. And it was really good for me to witness as a healer what that felt like, right? And that there was always this need to try and get that reassurance, and also not always feeling comfortable to speak my needs because I was afraid that they were just going to run away again, and so my body became more consumed and more consumed, right? And that was then that really witnessing of how that felt for me, but also how much I wasn't honoring myself. How much was I not being able to come into that space of self-love,
Mm.
self-honoring, and
Mm.
talk to somebody openly. If they can't hold space for you and they're going to be avoidant and they're not emotionally available in a committed relationship, you shouldn't be in a committed relationship. And that's the
Mm.
truth. If you've got relationships, and I've got so many relationships, friendships especially, that are so emotionally available and they are so open and easy, and I feel safe. So and having that connection until I form a committed relationship that I know that they're on my wavelength and that they're not going to create so much havoc in my
Mm.
field, then I actually have a little bit more anxiety because I'm still in that unknown energy of how is this going to work out? How are they going to respond to this? I still step into speaking my truth, but then it's also got that fear there that, oh, are they actually going to accept me as me right now? Or
Mm.
am I going to be left alone and single again? That kind of feeling, though I still really love my relationship with being single as well. It
Mm.
still hurts. It still hurts to sometimes feel like you're being rejected or not seen or heard or loved.
Mm.
But then we're actually creating space for someone that is going to see us and be available and all that. So it's really that aspect. Are you honoring relationships and getting committed to relationships that are not honoring?
I think
If
this is
I
a big topic. This is a very big topic, Kelly, what you just now said. And I think to all the listeners, as you can see, it is not a topic which can be finished in an hour or 30 minutes or 20 minutes, but it is something that definitely for all the listeners who have listened today about you, in particular relationships, in particular anxiety. And as you rightly said, there are so many things, so many aspects. But I still want to ask you, and just moving further before I close this and before we talk about the next episode that we're going to bring in related to this, want to ask you this, like, as you said, like, if you're not accepting if you're committed to a relationship and you are committed to that, then this anxiety is limited or restricted or can be less anxiety. But you don't have control over the other side of the coin, right? You can only feel from inside that this is what I am committed and this is what I am less anxiety or less nervous. But things can go wrong, and
Mhm.
you can find yourself that, oh, my decision was bad, or my thought process was wrong. How do you then contemplate this anxiety at that stage and say that, oh, I was actually, I should have done this or I should have done that? But that's also an anxiety. That's also where they do this and do that. Tell me something, what your experience the other side of the coin, because you have been into experiencing yourself a lot. And that's the beauty of it, that your wisdom makes an important part for listeners to understand how to deal or how to manage or how to forgive and how to let go and how to forget. But how anxiety can be handled even sensitively, easily,
Mm.
with your own experiences. When you lose
Yeah.
control, when you lose that, you don't know other side of the coin. You may feel today, I'm good, feeling good about this relationship, I'm committing it. But after a few months, few days, or few years, you think that, oh, that was not the right decision because that other side of the coin failed. Then how do you deal with this kind of anxiety?
Well, that comes back to really, I feel like it's not even an anxiety. It's really about a shaming and a judgment aspect, that we shame and judge ourselves
All
for
right.
for a
Mhm.
process and a moment that we are now reflecting on to change. We cannot change a program that we're not aware of, right? So when we
Mhm.
actually witness this, and this becomes very confronting for a lot of people in spiritual awakening, we awaken to our stuff. We awaken to the problems, and we become into ownership. When we own, yes, I did that. Maybe I could have done that better.
Mm.
But I also did that because of these things. We're
Mm.
understanding ourselves and creating a better relationship with ourselves, right?
Mm.
And then
Right.
if we're shaming and judging ourselves, again, you're
Mm.
condemning yourself. You
Mm.
are making yourself wrong. So you are not creating a better relationship with yourself. If you see that, yes, that wasn't ideal, and now I would like to, but understanding why you even action those things, but not sort of giving yourself a gateway to say, oh, well, it was that caused this. And, it's really just being honest with yourself. Okay, do I really want to do that again? Obviously, that's a behavior that arises when I feel this situation or I'm engaging in that. And now you have more awareness. Okay, next time that comes up, it can be wounding as well. So you
Mm.
sit with yourself and take a moment. Don't rush into something, and then just be your own best friend. Hold yourself in that moment and don't go, oh, you're so wrong, da da da. Because, I mean, in some relationships, a narcissist or someone that loves to gaslight will go, yeah, you did it all. That was your own fault. Not even acknowledging that some of that was actually because the way they were making them feel. And so
Mm.
it can actually be twisted in the wrong way if we go into shaming and judgment, and we're
Mm.
not going to heal, and we're actually going to feel less love for ourselves. It's like,
Very well.
how can we love ourselves more in that moment and
Mm.
be with ourselves and be that best friend for ourselves? And I think for myself, the more I've been able to be with those parts of myself and own that I'm human, I'm not perfect. As much as I am really great at working and unpacking and doing all this, it's because I've sat with these pieces. And as part of the archetype of the wounded healer, I continually get to experience all kinds of new stuff. And
Absolutely.
and at one stage, I used to actually have this perception of, how can I be a healer if I'm still going through this and this and this? Because again, I'm judging
Mm.
myself. Well, now it
Yeah.
actually gives me so many more dimensions and so many more layers. And people actually
Mm.
come in and go, like, I feel it's actually really safe with you because you get
Yeah.
me. What I'm experiencing right now and the
Mm.
way I'm feeling, I
Mm.
don't feel like I'm crazy. And I'm like, well, no, because that's how we're actually moving through these things and seeing ourselves for our own truths. And then
Mm.
we're able to make a choice in the
Mm.
future about
Yeah.
how we want to action that. And sometimes we are still governed by reactive behavior. And when then we go, oh, I started doing that thing.
Mm.
Okay, not judging, but
Mm.
making a choice of difference there, because shame and judgment will only condemn you, and it will
Absolutely.
only lower your vibration and create more anxiety that you feel wrong. And then you're
I love it.
scared for the next time. Whereas if you actually come into this with using that to empower you and
Mm.
heal you and
Mm.
change you and allow you to evolve, and sometimes it takes a few goes at it. we didn't learn to tie our shoelaces in one go. Most people didn't anyway. And,
Mm,
sometimes when we've adapted patterns and fear, it takes a few times. And we need to create relationships with people that we can say, hey, I
mm,
get this way. I sometimes have this anxious attachment and I really need you to make me feel secure. I'm going to approach you and just to tell me and listen to me is what all I need. And all of a sudden you start to, what do you need? And if you can express that,
mm.
everything starts to change, right? So,
Yeah.
it's owning that part, knowing what you need, and then being able to express that. And if those people can't meet you in what you need to heal, then they're
Mm.
not, you've got to honor yourself until you can find people that will actually honor you as well and
Yeah.
help you through those processes. It is not up to somebody else to heal you, though. That is really important to understand. The
Mm,
journey is for self. I am, as much as
mhm,
I'm a healer, I
mm.
don't heal you. I shift your energy, but your patterns and behaviors and those things you need to be ready to accept and own and want to transform. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, I'm
Mm.
just creating fluff over it for a minute for it to expose
Yeah.
itself again.
Yeah.
You need to take the journey. The healer ignites the healing within you. So other relationships can do that. And I've had many relationships that um I've experienced wounding in or had to experience anxiety in or things like that so I can
Mm.
get a better relationship with myself and start to realize my own patterns that I was a people pleaser and that I feared abandonment and I was all in judgment and shaming and blaming, and that all evolved by witnessing those pieces in myself and having that relationship and going, oh, why would I stay here? Like, I want more. I deserve more. And it's choosing that for yourself,
Yeah. Yeah.
choosing you and choosing a better life. And that really, it's not easy. The
Mm.
process of awakening and spirituality isn't easy, but it gets easier. It truly does. You have more tools and more awareness and more connection to self that everything gets easier.
Yes, thank you. That was great message to all the listeners. You can listen, and then we can keep talking and we can keep continuing because when Keely talks, then it's mesmerizing that we have to hear more. But with the time constraint, I can't do that today. But we accept this, and all the listeners, you can see that the message was quite clear and very strong from Keely that. Shaming and judging yourself and having that relationship with yourself and learning from yourself and not blaming others is what I take out from this whole thing message that got about anxiety. Because anxiety is also rejections. Anxiety, when you are anxious, you do lots of rejections, and rather than positive, you move towards a different dimensions. But you can see Keely herself has got so many dimensions of relationship that she has experienced that she could talk about it and she could make a great resonating for all of the listeners who are into various kinds of relationships can take some leaf out of this. So with that, I want to thank once again Keely for this beautiful episode today. But I we are going to bring, and I want to give a little bit trailer from Keely because I want to bring continuing this topic of anxiety in relationships is was today's topic. But relationships has got to so many things, not just anxiety. It has got a fear. It has got an acceptance of relationship. It has got, all sorts of that we say that in relationship, I want this, I want that, or I don't need this, I don't need that. We all attach with relationships. And so many things are there. But then we come to a conclusion of what exactly we want to live a relationship or manage relationship, or how do you define and design a relationship that is called like an ultimate relationships. And I think that's the topic which Kelly is going to give us a little bit insight today, only just a few seconds of trailer what is in store for the next episode that you all should be able to listen. After anxiety, we are not going to go in fear, we are not going to go in enjoyment of relationship or sadness or seriousness of relationship, but we are going to dive deep into the ultimate relationship, as we say. What
Mhm.
is the ultimate relationship? What is the whole universe, as we say? We all are universe in ourselves. So we all create relationship in ourselves. But let's see what is this ultimate. Over to you, Kelly, to give us a little
Mm.
trailer for our next episode.
Well, it's a quick story in relation to this topic, and it's a share that I did recently. And originally, I was seeking the ultimate relationship, in other words, with the partnership, right? And realizing that to have that ultimate relationship, I needed to be more aligned and vibrationally balanced with that. And then I had experienced other relationships that, but each one was showing me a piece, was showing me something. And the universe actually energetically kind of twisted those words on me. They're words, and it was actually giving me the ultimate relationship. The ultimate relationship is with ourselves, right? How do we form that ultimate relationship? How do we form the ultimate relationship with our beliefs, our values, the things that ignite us and raise our vibration to a place that we become living in joy and bliss and abundance, and then most likely will attract the partner that is going to create an ultimate relationship. How does that flow from our own experience with our own selves? Because, someone that is vibrating at a very high state is not going to align to somebody at a lower state. So how do we create that? And it's really about coming into alignment with selves. The moment we start to do this alignment, the universe lines up with us, life lines up with us, and all of a sudden our relationships with everything become ultimately the best thing ever. So the life revolves around this internal relationship with self. So yeah, that's kind of where we're heading with that topic.
Excellent, excellent. So you can see that you will be more uncovering from Kelly in the next episode, very coming to soon. Watch out for that. And this is the ultimate relationship which all are seeking. Everyone, including myself, we seek as we evolve. We want this ultimate relationship every single time. As she rightly said, blissful moments. Blissful is not just blissful, it's we are seeking for blissful moments every time, each time. And then whatever relations we have created, whether it's with humans or whether it's any attachments or whether it's any nature or anything, we still want that blissful moment. We are still seeking for that every moment. So that's the ultimate relationship which comes within, internal, as she said very clearly and loudly. I would love to more about that and uncover more from her in our next episode, which will be fascinating. And I guess to all the listeners who are listening, please tune in. And if you want to know what is your ultimate relationship and how do you create or how do you manage that and what is that means to you as a survival, as a growth, as an expansion of your, and but ultimately evolvement of all humans. And so once again, I thanks once again Kelly for this beautiful episode, and we are looking forward to these ultimate relationships in our next episode with her. This is emotional well-being. This is all we are talking about, emotional well-being, a podcast, a talk series, which is ultimately bringing you speakers like Kelly, who are not just intellect, but also experienced on their own, and sharing their wisdom, contribution to them makes most important for everyone's life journey, including this episode that we have done today. So thank you once again, Kelly, for this beautiful episode, and looking forward to that for next episode. Until then, I want to just give you one last opportunity to say whatever you have to say to our audiences, what they are in store for.
Yeah, thank you everyone for listening in today. And thank you, Shailesh, for allowing me to share. It is a subject very, very close to my heart. And yes, I'm very honored to be on the Emotional Wellbeing series here, because it is like we're all here to experience the most well-being life and emotionally balanced life that we can. And of course, if you're actually looking to find me, you can find me on many platforms under Energetically Inspired. It's Kelli Hurley, but it will be Energetically Inspired. And yeah, by all means, reach out to either one of us if you have something you wanted to add, or a topic that you might feel that we would love to, you think that we might be able to share and enlighten you guys with, because that's what it's all about. So if you've got some sort of emotional well-being subject that you feel would be potent and we might be able to share enlightenment, please touch base.
Absolutely. Yes, all the listeners, we will send all the Kelly's details that you can ask us a question directly. We will give you the feedback as best we can. As you know, she's ultimately here to help and to heal. That's her job. That's her role. That's her purpose. Once again, thank you, Kelly. Bye for now. Take care.